I wish that buzzing wasn't back there. I really do. Well, I just now turned it on. It wasn't that one. Um, this is lesson 5 in our simple survey of the Old Testament. Number 7, word 7 is united, which stands for United Kingdom. Uh, Sounds like a washing machine. This is lesson 5. We're talking about David, some of the events during his tenure as the king of Israel. When David became king, the nation needed stability very bad. It was in a mess. It was disorganized. There wasn't any unity. As a matter of fact, there was a lot of animosity between some of the tribes. And he had to unite the nation, and this is what he attempted to do. One problem was that there was no national capital. King Saul had reigned from Ephraim, and then David had been reigning for 7 years from Hebron. And so David decided they needed a national capital. And as you know, he chose Jerusalem for the place. And there was no centralized place of worship. So he wanted to make Jerusalem the focal point, both politically and religiously. Everybody would look to Jerusalem. That would be the unifier in the nation. For the various festivals and things, people would go to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem would become a special place in the minds of the people. Last week we were talking about bringing the ark in order to make Jerusalem the capital of religious events. He wanted to bring the ark of the Lord to Jerusalem. And they went to where it was being stored. They transported it improperly. Uzzah reached up, he steadied the ark. He thought it was going to turn over, and he died when he touched the ark, because that was contrary to the divine law. David was angry because the Lord had burst forth against Uzzah, because Uzzah was struck dead. And because Uzzah died there, that place is called Perez Uzzah to this day. And David was afraid of the Lord that day. He was afraid because of what happened. You know, this ark, maybe it's not such a good thing to have around. And he said, how can the ark of the Lord come to me? Do I really want to bring this to Jerusalem? Is this what God wants? Is this a wise thing to do? He doesn't see that much value to it. He thought there was value to it, making Jerusalem the center, the focal point of religion. But he decided that maybe that wasn't the best thing to do. Verse 10 says, David was not willing to take the ark of the Lord into the city of David, but David took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. In Jerusalem, the Jebusites, they were in possession of the larger section of Jerusalem. And David conquered part of that city. And this part of the city he captured, he called the city of David. Well, if you go where today, there still is the city of David. I was over there and went through the city of David. But that's where he had his headquarters at, and that's where he wanted to take the ark, but decided not to. So the ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. Because Uzzah died, David doesn't want to take it to Jerusalem, so he decides to leave it right here with this guy, Obed-Edom. So it's there for 3 months, and good things are happening in this fella. I mean, he's prospering, the Lord's blessing him right and left. Well, word comes to David about what happened. It was told King David, the Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him because of the ark of the Lord. Because the ark of the Lord was there, he was prospering greatly. David had another change of heart. He went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. He decided, since it was doing this fellow so much good, that maybe it would do him that much good also, and he brought it on into the city. David's military victories are discussed in chapters 8 through 10. I don't want to go through that, but there were a lot of them. He was a great military leader. Most of his life was spent in war. It's one of the reasons he wasn't able to build the temple. It was a bloody time, and David had a lot of blood on his hands. He seemed to delight in war. Things were going very good in Israel. And you know what happened when things start going good? You work hard. In a church, for example. You work hard to establish a congregation and to make everything happen that ought to be happening to make the church strong. And what happens when you have achieved that goal? Well, there's a tendency to sit back and relax. There's a tendency to take it easy. And this is what people are often inclined to do. I remember used to when I really worked, had a real job. Through the week, I would think about Saturday. Everything I was going to get done on Saturday, I'd make me a paper list. And along about 3 or 4 o'clock, I worked hard all day. About 3 or 4 o'clock, I was tired. And still had 4 or 5 things to go on my list. And I decided, well, I had a pretty good day. I think I'll kick back and go to town and have some fun tonight with BR. Well, that's what we tend to do when we get comfortable. And I think this is what happened in the life of David. While David was struggling as king to stabilize an unstable nation, it took all of his time. He worked very hard as an administrator, as a warrior. He worked constantly. But he's got to the top of the mountain, so to speak. So he decides he's going to sit back and take it easy. That brings us into chapter 11 with David and Bathsheba. One of the things, as the text starts out, chapter 11, is that it was the season for the kings to go to war. It was during the springtime. At every spring, the kings would go and they'd have their wars. They were always warring somewhere. And this time, Israel was no different. She would go out and fight her battles, trying to capture more territory, trying to get more of the booty and stuff, things that belonged to other people. But this time, David decided to stay home. King always goes with his army, but David decided on this occasion he's going to stay home, and instead Commander Joab's in charge of the military. Well, when David's at home, you know the story of Bathsheba. One evening, he didn't have anything to do. He's reclining on his couch. He decided to walk around on his porch, and that you stand there at the edge of the mountain where his palace used to be. You look over a hill all the way down into the valley where Gethsemane was. And there were houses built on that hill. And as the king stood there, he could look over the hill, and he seen Bathsheba on the housetop bathing. I've heard a lot of stuff said about her bathing in public and all this other stuff. That's pretty much common in the Middle East and even in the Far East, even today in Israel, or not Israel, India. A lot of people do that. Some people go to the river, and a lot of their personal business takes place on the housetop. That's where you get your haircuts, and a lot of bathing goes on, because normally you're pretty much out of sight. But it was a custom of the people. And Bathsheba's up there. She's bathing on the rooftop, as she's probably done 1,000 times before. And David looks at her, and he likes what he sees. He sends for her. He takes her. He has a child. Her and him has a child eventually. Of course, the story is very sordid. Most of us are familiar with that story. When David found out Bathsheba was pregnant, he knew he was in trouble. because Uriah couldn't be the father. Uriah is Bathsheba's husband. He can't be the father. He's out fighting the war. He was a military leader of some sort, but he had gone out with the army to fight the war. At the time, she became pregnant, so he's going to know the child's not his. Well, if the child's not his, it belongs to another man. If it belongs to another man, Bathsheba's committed adultery, which she did, and for that she would be stoned to death. Well, David can't pursue that course because it's not right, it's not fair. So he searches his mind, he comes up with a plan. I'm going to bring Uriah home. Uriah, no. Is that right? Uriah, Bathsheba. How come I get all these names mixed up? I'm going to bring Uriah home and let him be with his wife. And that's what he did. He sent for Uriah. He came home. And Uriah won't go to his wife like most men would. You come home, what's the first thing you do? You go hug your wife. Well, Uriah doesn't do that. And David tried to get him drunk to get him to go home, and he still won't do that. And the reason was, as long as his comrades were out on the field fighting a battle, he himself was not going to engage in any type of pleasure with his wife. So he's a much more noble man than David is. Well, he can't get Uriah to be with Bathsheba, so his only recourse, according to his thinking, is to send him back to where the battle's being fought. He sent a note with him to make sure that Uriah is sent to the wall, which means you're going to die. You don't assault a fortified city by going up to the wall, because you're going to die. They're going to shoot you with arrows from the top of that building. They're going to throw rocks on top of your head. They're going to throw hot water on you. They're going to throw fire down. You're going to die. So they don't assault a fortified city that way. Well, David had in his note that Uriah is to storm the wall, and Commander Joab, he saw the note. He knew something was wrong because this boy is going to die. But his king told him to do it, so he did. So Uriah and the men he commanded, sometimes we forget about all those guys. Uriah and the men he commanded went against the wall, and they died, which was inevitable. Well, with Uriah dead now, and we don't know how many other men, David decided he can marry his wife, and everything will be just fine. Nobody will ever be the wiser. And that's what he did. He married her. Well, it was after the child was born, I believe it was a year later if I'm correct, Nathan the prophet was sent to the king. They went through a little parable. But the bottom line was, Nathan told David, God knows you're guilty of the adultery, Bathsheba being pregnant, the death of Uriah, and the other men that were with him. God knows it. And David admits to his sin. He has sinned against God and many other people as well, including the entire nation. Well, the Lord said he was going to let David live. He was an important man. He had an important key role to play in the establishment of the nation. David was going to live, but he was going to suffer consequences for his sin. Two things were going to happen. Number one, there was going to be trouble in his household throughout the rest of his life, and there was. Even on his deathbed, he was having trouble with one of his boys who was trying to beat Solomon to the throne. There was a lot of meandering going on that resulted in a lot of deaths. But the other one was that the child that was born to him in Bathsheba, that child was going to die. And in chapter 12, the child did die. I've preached this a lot of times. Anybody that's been around me much has heard it, I'm sure. When the king's child, his son, was very ill, and and he prayed to God to the point of exhausting himself. It went on for 7 days. He laid face down on the ground, praying and praying and praying. And his advisors, his counselors, they were concerned about their king. You know, he's losing his mind. He's lost grip with reality, and he's going to die if he doesn't do something. Well, over this period of time, the child finally dies. And now these guys, they've got to tell David that, man, they don't know what to do. If the king was this bad, when the child was sick, what's going to happen to him now that the child is dead? They thought it'd push him over the edge. Well, they had to tell him because he knew something was up. And they did. Well, instead, David got up off of the ground. He went, he cleaned himself up. He bathed. He put on a fresh change of clothes. He went and he prayed to God. He come back to his house and he sat down and started eating food. And these guys, they couldn't stand it any longer. They don't get it. The king he's weird. The child's sick and you pray to the point of making yourself sick. The child dies and you get up and go on with business. What's the deal? And the bottom line is this. Why should I fast? Can I bring the child back? Rhetorical question. The answer is no. He said, I shall go to him in paradise, but he will not come back to me. David understood that death was not the end of existence, the end of life. He knew that when a person dies, they go into the Hadean world to live on. And one day, David would die just like all people are going to do. And when he died, he would go and he would be with his son again. He knew he would be with his son, which implies future recognition in the world that is to come. Well, that's one of my favorite lessons in the Old Testament, I suppose. The other problems. Let me see if I got any of this stuff on here. No. Yeah, I do. Dathan reached David. I have all this on the screen. I'm sorry. The Lord is, you shall not die. 2 penalties. Oh, sorry. I didn't know this was on here. The sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me, taking the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. And secondly, because by this deed you have utterly scorned the Lord, the child who is born to you shall die. We just talked about the second one that God told him about. That's it in 2 Samuel. And after the child dies, Bathsheba conceives again. She bears a second son, and this son is named Solomon. Okay, now the second part. There's going to be trouble in David's family. And we see this unravel rather quickly in chapter 13. Amnon, Tamar, and Absalom. The situation is Amnon is a half-brother to Tamar and Absalom. Same father, different mothers. So Amnon, he lacks the looks of Tamar. And one day, by force, he took her and he raped her. Okay? And this thing was made known. When the king heard of all these things, he was very angry. His son raped his daughter. I'd say he was very angry over that thing. Then Absalom murdered Amnon because he had raped his sister by force. So he took it upon himself to kill the guy who was guilty of the crime. David hadn't done anything in the way of punishment, but Absalom took it upon himself to make sure punishment was meted out. Because he murdered Amnon, David exiled Absalom. He didn't want to kill him. It was his favorite son, actually. The son he favored, I guess I should say. So instead of meting out justice as it should have been meted out, David instead had him exiled. He was out of Israel, or out of Jerusalem rather, for 3 years. After 3 years, Absalom returned to Jerusalem, and he got blood in his eyes. He's mad. He's angry with his father because he had exiled him for what he did. And Absalom's ultimate plan is to overthrow his father. These are the kinds of problems that David suffered because he was guilty of the sin with Bathsheba. There are consequences to sin. When we sin, there are consequences. We always think about the consequences of sin being at death. You go to hell. But as we learn from this text, the consequences of sin happen now also. Don't have to wait for an eternal place of fire. The consequences can take place in this world as well. Absalom returned to Jerusalem. He intends to overthrow his father, and he does it like a skilled politician. He's very good at politics. In all Israel, there was no one so much to be praised for his handsome appearance as Absalom. That's, believe it or not, that gets a lot of votes from people, especially women and some feminine men. They are really swayed by a man's physical appearance. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him. He looked like the perfect specimen. So Absalom lived 2 full years in Jerusalem, but he couldn't come into the king's presence. 5 years have gone by. He hasn't seen his daddy. He wants to see his daddy. So arrangements are made, and Absalom gets to see his daddy. They hug and kiss and make up. Or at least David thought so. In chapter 15, we get into Absalom's conspiracy. He's going to start, I forgot what they call it, but he's going to start smoozing everybody, is what it comes down to. I guess that's the right way to say it, smoozing. Supposed to be a better word. Absalom used to rise early. He'd stand by the way of the gate. The gate is where the judgment took place. That's where the judges sit. If you took somebody to court, you went to the gate, and there would be somebody there to hear your crime. Well, there are people that's going to be going to the judges at the gate, so Absalom decides to hang out there, and that's what he does. He hangs out at the gate. When any man had a dispute to come before the king for judgment, Absalom will call to him and say, "From what city are you?" And he tell him, "Your servant is of such and such a tribe in Israel." Absalom would say to him, "Your claims are good and right. You're justified in your suit against this other fella. You ought to win your suit. But there is no man designated by the king to hear you." The court system was backed up. There wasn't enough judges to take care of all the claims that came before the judges. So if you went before a judge and you had a complaint that wasn't of great urgency, chances are pretty good you're never going to see the judge. Okay, and this is what he's talking about. I wouldn't do like my father. He doesn't say that, but that's the implication. I wouldn't do like my father. There'd be enough judges here to take care of everybody, and your suit would be won, and you could be satisfied with the results. In other words, I would do a better job of governing than my father's doing. He says it without saying it. Absalom would say, "Oh, that I were judge in the land. Then every man with a dispute or cause might come to me, and I would give him justice. If I was a judge, you'd win your case." That's what he's telling everybody. There'd be two people, one on both sides of the issue. He'd tell them both. If you were coming to me, you'd win your case. If you were coming to me, you'd win your case. He was he's a politician, and he was very good at it. Whenever a man came near to pay homage to Absalom, he would put out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. He was the son of a king. People would come. They were going to pay homage to him as the son of a king. He would take the man by the hand. He'd lift him up, and he'd give him an unholy kiss. don't bow for me, me and you are brothers. Thus Absalom did to all of Israel, who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. This is what he was wanting to do. This went on for 4 years. For 4 years, he smoothed the people, day after day after day. And according to inspiration, he stole the hearts of the people away from his father. The people liked him better than David. And why not? With David, they're not getting justice. With Absalom, they would be certain to get justice. Let's vote for Absalom. Oh, I forgot. This is a monarchy. Can't vote. You're stuck with what you got, whether you like it or not. Well, maybe there should be an overthrow of the king. Maybe that would be a good idea. Maybe it's time to change kings. David had to flee from Jerusalem because that's what Absalom did. He had enough people in love with him, military people as well. He had enough people to support him that he could take Jerusalem by force. Word came to David, who's at home relaxing in the palace. Absalom's coming to kill you and take the throne. So David has to flee the city, and he does. A messenger came to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel have gone after Absalom. David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, arise and let us flee, or else there will be no escape for us from Absalom. We won't get away. We're all going to die. We see the faith of David in what he does and what he says as he's leaving the city. Abiathar came up, and behold, Zadok came also with all the Levites, and they were carrying the ark of the covenant of God. They got to the edge of the city, and they set the ark of the covenant of God right there. And as David and his people passed by, they were passing by the ark. Okay, this is for good fortune in the future. And then after they pass through, they're going to take the ark of God and go with David. That's what they got on their mind. The king said to the priest, carry the ark of God back into the city. They all passed by, and they wanted to go with him. He said, take it back to the city, put it back in its tent. Okay, and here's his reasoning. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back to Jerusalem and let me see the ark and his dwelling place. If this is what the Lord wants, he'll bring me back. But that needs to stay here. That's part of what's going to unify the nation. The ark needs to stay in its place. It doesn't need to run. But if God says, I have no pleasure in you, David, behold, here I am. Let God do to me what seems good to him. Leave the ark in its place. If God wants me to be king, he'll bring me back to Jerusalem. If God doesn't want me to be king, he'll make sure I never come back to Jerusalem. Whatever God has determined should happen, it's going to happen. But just leave the ark of God in its place. David had an incredible amount of faith in God. I know he's got some really bad blemishes. But back during this period of time, when faith never was really, really strong among most people, David was a man who had an enormous amount of confidence in God's providential activities in life. He knew that God was involved in his life all the time. If it's the will of God, I never come back. If it's the will of God, I come back. Whatever the will of God is, that's going to be what happens. So don't take extra measures like bringing the ark with me. It needs to stay in its place. You kind of want to grab David and shake him, and then you want to grab him and you want to hug him. He's one of those kind of people. but he had an incredible amount of faith. He had insight into the nature of God that I think is unparalleled at this particular time in history. I don't think most people seen God's working in their life to the degree that David did. He knew God was going to fulfill his will, whatever it might be. And that's a nice thing to think on. Well, Absalom entered Jerusalem. David's gone. Absalom moves in. What's he going to do? He's going to take control. In verse 11, thus says the Lord. Well, this is going back. Remember when God told David that there would always be trouble in his household. Well, one of the things that God prophesied would happen is God said, I will take your wives before your eyes, give them to your neighbor, and your neighbor shall lie with your wives in the sun, the side of this sun, in the daylight. In other words, David committed his crime in secrecy, and God would execute his punishment in a way that everybody would be able to see it. And this is what's fixing to happen. I shouldn't have done that. I should back up. Well, what happened was Absalom, one of his first orders of business, and this was common back then, was to lie with all the wives of the king. That's usually what they would do. And what they did to make the indignity heaped upon David greater than ever, his servants put up a bunch of tents on top of his house. And David, in the daylight, while all the people were watching, David would go into these wives, go into this one, or Absalom rather. He would go into this one, he'd go into this one, he would go into this one. By lying with their wives back then, that was a sign that there was a new king in town. Okay? Old king's gone, new king's in. How do you know? You got the old king's wives. And that's why they did this. It was a very important thing to them. It seems awful crude to us, but this was a sign that there was a new king in town. Anyway, it doesn't last long. Absalom's the king for just a short period, and he gets killed. He gets his hair caught in a tree. Joab finds him, kills him. They tell David, and of course David mourns over his son. There's a big story there, but I don't want to go into that story. The point is, God told David that there are going to be two consequences for your sin, and both of those consequences were fulfilled in a very limited amount of time, indicating, of course, that the words of Nathan, the prophet, truly had to have come from God. Otherwise, how could Nathan have known what was going to happen? Well, Absalom's killed, and David moves back into the city, and he takes up his residence once again. The next major failure in David's life is taking a census, at least what's recorded for us. He took a census of the people. He wanted to count his military. He wanted to know how big his military was, and he wasn't supposed to do that. That was a no-no. Because he did, or I should say, let's back up. Because this is how it all came about in verse 1, chapter 24. The anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, Go number Israel and Judah. Notice the language. The Lord, he incited David. Go number Israel and Judah. In chapter 24 and verse 10, it says, But David's heart struck him after he had numbered the people. The Lord, he incited David, go number Israel and Judah, but David's heart struck him after he did what the Lord incited him to do, saying, I have sinned greatly in numbering the people. But now, O Lord, please take away the iniquity of your servant, for I have done very foolishly. How are we supposed to understand that? That looks like a blatant contradiction. On the one hand, God says, number the people. And then after David did, he says, forgive me for numbering the people. How are we supposed to understand this? I brought this up. I don't know how much time I got. How much time I got, Jerry? Yeah, I'll never get done, so we'll have to finish it next week. But I brought this up because I want to show you the complexity of studying the Scriptures on occasion. And then number two, show you how we go about understanding what's actually being taught. When we read, well, Old or New Testament, many times we can't understand what's being said because the same chapter, it appears that we have a contradiction. And how can that be? We're told that God never contradicts himself. Well, perhaps it's an error. We're told that the Bible is the inspired Word of God, 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17, which means there cannot be any errors in it. If God is perfect, if God is holy, if God is all-powerful and all-wise, then God ought to be able to produce a book that has no errors whatsoever. Boy, I can't think this morning. It's not supposed to have any errors, no matter what. Okay? But how do we account for it? If you study the Old Testament, you're going to read a lot of passages like that. I've written up a little chart. If some of you want that chart, I'll give it to you. I don't know how many of you even be interested in it. But it's a timeline of the kings of Israel and the prophets. And as you study what the Bible says about the years that each king reigned, you see a lot of contradictions. One king reigns for 8 years. Another king reigns for 25 years. And 5 years after the reign of the king, forget it. I can't think. What you have is you have what appears to be an overlap in the reigns of the kings. 2 kings are reigning not at the same time, but one king reigns 10 years. There's only 15 years left for the next king, but he reigns for 25 years. And how you understand that? There's a lot of mistakes, not mistakes. There's a lot of what appears to be mistakes in the Bible. I think this might be why so many people think there are mistakes in the Bible. It's because of passages like these. They run across them and they don't seem to make any sense. They seem to contradict one another, just like this one. God incites David to number the people, and when David does it, he commits a sin. How can that be? Think about it, and we'll talk about it. What do you say, you little hard-headed outfit?